Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co-host, Jon Stern.
Hey everyone.
And the Seth Manfield. Not to be confused with Seth Mansfield from the Evens Odds podcasts. Seth does not know this, because he doesn't listen, I assume. But one of the other shows on our network, Even Odds, the host of it, Mason, has said your name wrong probably like 1,000 times, and he keeps calling you Seth Mansfield. And this week his co-host was like, dude, you need to stop. His name is Manfield. And then it was like a joke for the rest of the show. And so, to celebrate the invention of Seth Mansfield, I'm going to add an additional token that is an evil twin of Seth Mansfield with like a curly mustache to the tokens when we get tokens made.
Yeah. It's a common misconception. My daughter, she like at school, everyone all of her teachers just call her Mansfield whenever.
Is that a name that other people have? Is that why he does it?
Yeah, it's like it's a common last name. Manfield is not, so it's like a thing that I've encountered before for sure.
Well, nobody even gets my last name right, so do you guys even know how to say my last name?
Oh, you're putting us to the test?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was Howland. Is that wrong?
Is it Holland or?
It is Howland. It is.
Okay. It's either, there's like one of two options, right? It was either Howland or Holland.
Yeah, but I get Holland almost every time.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's enough with last names. You know who won't forget Seth's name is our sponsor at Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com and get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. Oasis has everything you need. We really appreciate them. Check them out. 15% off every time when you on that first order. And then you can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good at checkout. So check them out. 4% off at Oasis Games on every order is one of the best deals you can get on the web. So I highly recommend that you check them out. You can also support the podcast directly by going to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron of the show. Seth, speaking of that, is it retweets or patrons? I'm not actually sure how your contest is working, so I want to give you a shot on it.
Yeah, so I'm just doing this giveaway on Twitter. It's not exclusively patrons of the podcast. It's whoever saw the tweet and has retweeted it, then you're entered into the giveaway. And I'm not going to do it this week on the podcast because I want to, if you haven't seen the giveaway yet, I wanted to let our viewers have a chance to enter. So,
sure.
I recommend following me on Twitter if you want to do that.
And it's at Seth Manfield, not Mansfield, on Twitter.
Yeah, and so I'll be piecing that stuff out next week on the podcast, and then on my stream, which hasn't officially started but should also be starting next week. So it's going to be a big week next week. And have a lot of cool foils, play mats, deck boxes, sleeves, whatever stuff I could find is just thrown together there. So awesome. Check that out if you want to win.
Hey, are you is Wizards giving you any direction on or any help on how to set up your stream or like any ideas on how to make good content, or are they just like do your own thing?
So the answer is kind of complicated because it's more of a not yet. They are, but like no, I don't have a Wizards of the Coast employee that lives right next door that can just come hop by and look at my stream, So, right. So it only goes so far. There have been some directions, like we've seen some players starting to use that Wizards of the Coast sponsored creator logo on their stream. So I'm going to be trying to do that, and I'm still in conversations with them about this, and it's part of why I haven't fully begun my stream, because there's so many different details about streaming that I don't know beyond just like starting it up and booting it and just making sure all the technology is right and the features within the stream. So yeah, that's a complicated question, but they are helping basically however they can, more or less.
All right. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
with that being said, back to the Patreon. If you want to support the podcast directly, patreon.com/ccmtg is the best way to do that. That goes directly back to us, and getting us the things that we need, getting those tokens made, stuff like that. So patreon.com/ccmtg. If you're a patron of any amount, you get to participate in the Patreon Always Improving Question of the Week. This week, Jake asks, what do you think of the new direction of play design is taking Planeswalkers? Gone are the days of walkers being generally powerful in favor of specialized tools. So I think this is referring to the 2 new Planeswalkers that were spoiled in this set. And I'd like to start by saying we haven't seen Dummer yet, so we don't know if the days of like super powerful planeswalkers are gone. Because Dummer could just be great.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a Gruul planeswalker that isn't pretty.
It's just not the best.
Like,
yeah, it's.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree. But with that being said, Seth, why don't you take the first stab at this one?
Sure. I mean, as Spencer mentioned, so far as of recording the podcast, we know about the 2 planeswalkers that have been spoiled. Both are 3 mana, and so to answer the question, you're not going to see a 3 mana planeswalker that is absolutely busted in terms of its abilities because it's 3 mana. You just can't have it, no matter what. So traditionally, Wizards has
kind of the veil seems pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, pretty powerful. Like even in Standard, it wasn't like you can't have Omnixilus, right? Your plus on your Planeswalker can't just be draw a card, right? At 3 mana, that just can't be a thing. I don't think. It has to tick down for that type of effect. And so at 3, I think to answer the question, both planeswalkers are pretty complex in what they're trying to do. And yeah, so it's like we've had Jace was, I think, the last 3 Jace Cunning Castaway, and that one just like wasn't quite strong enough for Standard. And these seem like they have a bit more potential. As John said, Liliana, that's the best 3 mana planeswalker that we've ever seen. But I think Wizards is kind of scared after the 3 mana ones, the lower converted mana cost ones being so strong, because those are the ones you can play 4 of in decks more easily, like the 3s and 4s, the 4 mana planeswalkers. So you have to make them a little bit more complicated in terms of what they do, I think. Yeah,
I think if I can go next, that I really liked the creature planeswalkers. Like, that was my favorite design of planeswalkers ever. I really liked Nissa. I really liked Jace. Like, I thought they were cool, interesting, fun. I mean, I thought all of them were cool, interesting. I tried playing Chandra. I know other people tried playing Chandra and stuff like that. With Kaya and or Kaya, that could be Kaya, and Dovin. I think that Dovin kind of sits in similar space to, and we'll get into Dovin in a little bit, but I think Dovin sits in similar space to that Jace that Seth just mentioned. And I think that having cards that are not slam dunks and that you have to figure out is more interesting. So
yeah, I guess my thoughts on it, first of all, I don't really agree with the premise of the question that that's the direction, because I think it's early to make that claim. We still have powerful planeswalkers in Standard, like Teferi, Vivian Reed, Vraska, Karn, where they seem to sort of follow a pattern where, the plus ability is some sort of card advantage, the minus ability is some sort of pseudo protection, and the ultimate is some sort of almost win the game effect. And I think we'll probably still see planeswalkers in that design space. One thing that I think that Wizards has really changed, though, is being more proactive in printing answers for those cards, besides just attacking them with creatures, which is how it used to be. There's cards that just directly kill a planeswalker, or non-land permanents or things like that. But I do think that it's nice to have some variety in what the planeswalkers do and have some sort of personalized take on it. I actually would prefer if they didn't have 5 different Vraskas or 5 different Chandras or whatever. But I understand there's some plot restrictions or flavor restrictions in that. But I like seeing kind of a unique effect on what I think should be a unique card. So I guess it's good.
Yeah, it's nice to see a bunch of cards, which this set definitely has a lot of cards that you just like have to read them a few times to really digest them, and then after you read them and understand what they do, you're like, well, is this good? I really don't know. And then you have to think about the applications that they have in standard and in modern and that type of thing. And I believe these planeswalkers definitely fit that bill.
Let's move on from the Patreon question and talk about some of these cards. Kind of moving on from Always Improving this week. It's been the holidays. You know, we improved by eating. But with that being
Hey,
said,
I joined the gym.
yeah, now it's New Year's. We'll get into that. But Seth, why don't we talk about some of the new cards? Why don't you read a Deputy of Detention for us?
Sure. I will do that for you guys here. So, Deputy of Detention. This is an Azorius creature for 1 colorless, a white and a blue. And so you have a 1/3 that when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls and all other non-land permanents that player controls with the same name as that permanent until Deputy of Detention leaves the battlefield. So that's the card, and it's similar to a couple cards that we've kind of seen before.
Maelstrom Pulse and D-Sphere come to mind.
Yeah, Detention Sphere, it's part of the name, right? That detention part of it. So you know you're gonna, and that's the exact same mana cost of Detention Sphere. So I can't help but comparing it to D-Sphere. It's certainly better than a card like Fiend Hunter, right? Like it's just straight up better. Because you can exile, not only can you exile any permanent, not any permanent, any non-land permanent with it, but you can also exile multiple permanents if they happen to be on the battlefield. So
Fiend Hunter could exile your own creatures, though.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
No, I don't know how often that comes up. I'm just saying that.
No, that's fair. Yeah. The mana cost. Yeah, I mean it's not a straight up like comparison.
You could argue that in a lot of decks, blue white in the right deck is easier to cast than white, right? So.
Yeah. And Fiend Hunter saw a little bit of play, right? It wasn't like a staple per se. This one feels like a card.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that it came up with Fiend Hunter because it saw play in the BAMP pod decks. So you would Fiend Hunter with your... You would get your own Fiend Hunter, exile your thing, and then sack it again sometimes to get the ETB effect of whatever creature you exiled.
Sure.
Because it would come back.
Yeah, this is a card I feel like we will see in more aggressive Azorius decks. Like, we've heard a decent amount about how busted the control decks will be with Hallowed Fountain now into Teferi, and we also have Absorb, another really good counterspell. This card is more in the other direction. I feel like even though it is removal, it plays really nicely alongside cards like just like Adanto Vanguard, any type of aggressive start, and you now have a creature. Maybe you're curving it into something like an Ajani or like a pump effect so that the body's actually relevant. So, yeah, I think it's going to fit in a white-blue aggressively oriented deck.
John, you had mentioned that Wizards was doing a better job about printing cards across all decks that could deal with Planeswalkers. Is this kind of one of the ones you were thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't even just say a better job. I think it's a design choice. This card, so I actually kind of felt differently than what Seth just said when I first saw this. I feel like the comparison is more to Detention Sphere than to Fiend Hunter. And I think there are some advantages and drawbacks to it being a creature. But I could see, for example, this being, in the sideboard of a blue-white control deck where, they bordered all their game one creature removal, and now you have, a blocker that also takes out, their experimental frenzy or whatever. I think this is quite a good card, and we'll see play in a lot of different archetypes.
It's notably at its best against Celestia, right? Like if your opponent just plays like Saproling Migration or like March of the Multitudes, and then you're just like, all right, kill them. Now I don't even have to worry about my creature dying because I'm targeting tokens. So tokens seem like the best possible target, right?
Yeah, like March of the Multitudes, it just crushes that card, right?
Oh, it gets rid of all the tokens too, like Decipher. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe
Decipher did that too. I just forgot. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes March look a little silly, especially into the March turns, right? Those turns where they march, say go, and they're like, okay.
I'm just thinking about those players that are out there who are setting up their double March turn. So like, all right, end of turn March, get my like 6 guys, and then you play your deputy, target a guy, and it's like, all right, I'll just respond, I'll just march again.
Oh,
it's like, all right, cool. Like, yeah. I can just imagine that happening. Someone just does that and like, oh yeah, it doesn't work.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the card's super powerful. I think that I'm really glad that it's not a human. That's was my very first thought when I saw it was, thank goodness this isn't a human. But
well, I mean, it's a wizard. Like, wasn't there a 2/1 wizard that doubles the effect of something when it comes in play? Like,
yes, I believe there is actually. That's a good point. There are wizard synergies that exist.
I was just thinking for modern though. Like, I'm glad that this doesn't just it can obviously the humans deck could still play it, but I'm just glad that it wasn't like, oh look what our new toy. Like, get out of here, Reflector Mage.
And I believe that card is Naban, Dean of Iteration. If we want to
start on your tribal wizard deck there. Yeah, I think it's a really good card. It will see play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, should we move on to Dovin?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about Dovin here. So Dovin Grand Arbiter, this is one of the 3 mana planeswalkers we were referring to a little bit earlier in the show. Also the exact same mana cost at a colorless and a white and a blue. So +1 until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals damage to a player, you get a loyalty counter on Dovin Grand Arbiter. So that's the only plus ability. And then we've got 2 minus abilities. One is -1, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. You gain 1 life. And then we have the -7. Look at the top 10 cards of your library, put 3 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, yeah, definitely a lot to take in with this one.
You guys are going to have to summon this. I've listened to multiple podcasts talking about this card already. I've heard people in our Discord talking about this card. But, it's really funny because people talk about, wanting it in kind of the same style deck that Seth was talking about with the last card we were talking about. Right, those blue-white aggressive decks, maybe splashing white and mono blue since those Thopters can hold Curious Obsession, stuff like that. But to me, I'm not impressed by any of these abilities except for the ultimate. And obviously, if you play lots of little things really fast into this, then you can ultimate really quickly. You could just straight up. I guess you could technically turn 4 ultimate this. But then it's kind of a really powerful draw 3. I don't know. I'm not sold. Sell me on it.
I mean, I think actually I don't know if you can possibly there's a way to turn 4 ultimate, but if you play, that is insane.
Yeah, I mean if you play 1-drop, double 1-drop, they all hit, right?
Yes.
And then it goes exactly to 7.
And then you play. Yeah, but here's the thing, right? I see those types of situations as almost a win more.
Right.
You're playing this card, but you already have 4 creatures that are capable of attacking, 3 creatures that are capable of attacking in play. So that's kind of what trips me up about it. Like, if you've already got that board,
I completely agree. You just had like your best start into 1-drop double 1-drop. So like, do you need to draw 3 cards?
But that being said, I think that the ultimate is much better than drawing 3 cards. I see it more towards the drawing 10 cards than drawing 3 cards. Because you're able to look at. First of all, it's probably not going to happen on turn 4. Very rarely will that ever happen. So, and when it happens later in the game, like your best 3 cards, like a lot of the time you'll be seeing like 4 lands, like a couple cards that maybe aren't high impact. So like you're almost just like drawing your top 10 cards, almost. Is how I see it in some situations.
Do you guys remember the first mono green devotion or the green red devotion deck?
I do.
Yeah. Do you remember that, John? So there was like the Burning Emissary deck, the version of the deck. There was a match at a Grand Prix where somebody went turn like this was on. It was either on camera or it was on the written coverage against Owen. They like had the turn 2 World Spine Worm, so they like played turn 1 elf, go burning. Activate. And that's what it reminded me of when we talked about the turn 4 Dovin ultimate. Anyway,
I think what so I'm looking at this card and I haven't listened to the other podcasts or the other reviews, but what immediately stands out to me for this card is not the ultimate, but just like if you play this in a deck without any synergies, I feel like the -1 ability, like if you just play this against a control deck and you go -1, -1, -1, let's just say that's what you do. You're getting 3 tokens with evasion for 3 mana. I don't even think that's a bad deal. If you're playing against an aggressive red deck with like Viashino Pyromancer 2/1s and you go -1, get a Thopter and a life, that's really good.
And then they go Chainwhirler attack and your guy dies.
Yeah, okay, it's not great against Chainwhirler.
I'm just kidding.
It's like the slowest spectral procession in history, though, right?
No, I actually agree with John. I think you can look at it as being a slow spectral procession, but the fact that you have a Planeswalker in play against a control deck, like for 3 mana, is just really why you're getting like they have to answer your card eventually, but you still immediately. I think the most often sequence when you're playing this is immediately minusing it to go down to 2 loyalty, because that's going to make the plus better on the following turn, assuming that token is still around. Then you have another attacker. So like I see it being at its best against control as just like a good card. I'm not sure that it needs to be in a super aggressive deck per se. It could be a cyborg card in control decks or something like that.
Yeah, I think like against control, you'll often go -1, then just plus, and you'll probably +2 or 3 if like they haven't killed your Thopters.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it's just a continual threat.
Yeah.
But but I think like overall the power level of the card, it doesn't excite. I don't know. I think it feels like a role player in certain matchups. I don't really like the plus ability very much, and I don't think racing towards an ultimate is really what you want to do with a Planeswalker. But I think the Thopters are very powerful, and I think it's a quality card.
Cool.
I agree with you. It's not overpowered, and the +1 doesn't actually do anything by itself, right? It's just putting more loyalty, so it's not impacting it anything other than helping you really to get to the -7. So.
All right, let's go to Hydroid Crisis. This is a blue, a green, and X for a Jellyfish Hydra Beast, John. It's the best creature type in history. It goes in your Jellyfish decks, so get that Jellyfish Tribal out. When you cast this card, you may gain half X life and draw half X cards rounded down each time. It's got Flying and Trample, and it enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that this will not be my favorite card in the set.
Okay, well, it's a fun card, but I don't know. Okay, so if you want to parse like how good it is, the first thing I want to do is think about like what happens at different mana costs. So
Yeah.
at 3 mana, you're getting a 1/1 flyer with no benefit. That's pretty bad.
Yep.
At 4 mana, you're basically a 2/2 flyer, gain 1, draw a card, which is
It's like a bad
it,
solemn.
it's like a bad a lot of things. Like it's basically like it's a bad Chupacabra. It's like an overcosted Jadelight Ranger. There's just better cards in standard at that point. And at 5 mana, you're basically getting a Muldrifter effect, right? You're getting a 3/3 flyer, draw 2, right?
No, you're still only getting 1.
You're only getting 1 still.
6 mana.
6 mana to draw 2.
Yeah.
6 mana to get a 4/4 flyer, draw 2, gain 2, which for what it's worth, I think is a pretty good rate.
We're seeing a lot of cards in this set that the power level comes from the flexibility that they have.
Yeah.
So
I feel like this card is gonna, if it sees play, because I think it's a big if. I don't think this card is think of this card as automatically playable. I don't think a control deck is gonna want to tap out at any of these
I agree.
points. But it does, like, it could be interesting in like some sort of ramp deck. I think there was a Prime Speaker, whatever was playable. Do you know which card I'm talking about?
Yeah, Prime Speaker's got it. ETB'd, you drew a bunch of cards. That saw play in Reed Duke's Bant ramp deck with Thragtusk and Farseek and stuff. And
well, there's also a Prime Speaker in this set too.
I thought you were talking about the old one.
I was talking about the old one.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Yeah, because it's Prime Speaker Vanifar. That's the one in the new set.
Right. So
we just got a Circuitous Root, which is explosive vegetation. Growth Spiral is in this set. It's an instant speed explore. I think Wizards is trying to tell us something.
I agree. This is a ramp card. What you guys are saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like at 6 mana, right? I'm pretty happy with it. John, did you have more you want to say on the Prime Speaker thing?
Well, I just think, like, if you imagine this card in a ramp deck against a deck like Golgari, right, where assuming they don't take it out of your hand somehow, and at some point, like with 10 or 11 or 12 mana or whatever, you're casting a huge threat, gaining a bunch of life, and drawing a card. That's going to be extremely difficult for them to beat.
Yeah.
But in any other sort of mid-range strategy, I feel that, even at 4, it's even like you're talking about at 6 mana, like it's a great limited card at 6 mana, but like, I mean, you're drawing 2 cards, spending 6 mana. I feel like there's probably better options, but.
So, let it be known that I love ramp decks.
Yeah.
And this card, like, first of all, the cast triggers, like, that, I love that, right? The fact that they can't absorb this and take my entire turn away from me, that's a pretty big deal for me. That's, like, basically how you lose with these style of decks versus control decks. It's like one of the reasons that Genesis Hydra was so good, right? Is that it was a cast trigger, if I'm not mistaken. And so stuff like that is, I think it's pretty important. And I mean, Kozilek, or maybe it was Ulamog, I don't remember. Whichever one the other ramp creatures that had those cast triggers, I think that's a big deal. World Breaker, you look at stuff like that. Those style of effects are what kind of let these decks compete against decks that could just, like, yeah, that's nice, syncopate for 1. Like,
that's a great point. I mean, because ramp decks in particular are so dense on, like, your lands and your ramp spells that you want a card you want your big spell to be like an Ulamog type card where if it gets countered, you're still getting some sort of bonus. And this is like, I feel like it's maybe being a little bit underrated. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be actively a strong card. It's not amazing when you're playing it for 4 or when you're playing for 6, but you're still pretty happy. But, like, it's nothing to sneeze at if you're drawing 2, gaining 2, and you have a 2/2. Like
a 4/4. That's
like a 4/4. Sorry, that's like on par with Muldrifter. Muldrifter was like, I mean, it might be that, like, it's close, right? At all these mana costs, if it's an X spell, it has to be close, right? It can't be straight up better at the at the lowest cost, which is 4. But like the fact is that decks that are playing it are going to have the ability to play it for 8 or play for 10 or play it for 12. And whenever that happens, like not only are you drawing a bunch of cards, but you're probably
more of
drawing
these.
Yes, you're probably drawing more of these. Yeah, so I think it's gonna be good. It's gonna be like a build around card for ramp decks. Yeah.
I also think that I think that John's point on like a lot of people are like, oh, I want to play the semi-tumor control deck or my bug control deck. That's not where I want this card. Like people are like, this is Sphinx's Revelation, and it's like, yeah, but not for the deck that you're thinking it's Sphinx's Revelation for. And one of the things that's really important in ramp decks is bridge spells. So these are spells that get you from point A to point B without dying, right? So, you have Galvanic Blast acted as a removal spell that let you live long enough to get to your Titans and stuff in Wolfrun Ramp. Solemn Simulacrum blocked to get you to those points. One of the cool things about this card is it digs you deeper while also acting as a bridge spell if you need it to. Not that you want it to do that, right? You want this to be your payoff. But if you need to play this for 4 after a Growth Spasm to block something, draw a card, and gain a little bit of life, you can do that. I like that.
Yep.
So, and once again, that's specifically in ramp decks. I'm specifically talking about ramp there. So
to Don's point, if ramp is bad, then this probably won't.
No, yeah, it probably won't see any point.
So like, it could go either way. But.
So the next card on this list is Judith the Scourge Diva. This card is 1 a black and a red for a 2/2. Is that Diva? Does that actually say the Scourge Diva?
It does.
All right, I'm just double checking. Legendary creature, human shaman. Other creatures you can get +1/+0. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. This card is so far out of my wheelhouse, John.
Well, it does a lot of different things. So the first comparison I would think of in standard is Ben Elish, whatever. What's the guy called? Sorry,
Ben Elish Marshall.
Yeah, Ben Elish Marshall, and it's obviously going to go in a different deck, but it's basically an anthem and a creature. I really don't know if there's like this would have to be in a completely new archetype that does not exist in standard right now. Maybe like an aristocrat style deck. I think in a way like it wants to be played with tokens because you want the anthem effect to benefit a lot of creatures, but then its second ability works with non-tokens. So
I've heard like 5 people mention, like in our Discord on podcasts, mention goblins in this card. So like Skirk Prospector, Siege Gang Commander, and then the my favorite one is the Firebrand, the one that you already sacrificed to deal 1, now deals 2. And it also attacks as a 2/2. So
yep, that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely good with those types of cards that you can any type of sacrifice effect it's better with. But even without that, it's like a Lord with an upside, right? So it's just a strong card. I think any Rakdos aggressive deck is going to play 4 of these. Like it's just a good card. I don't know. Well, maybe not 4 because it is legendary. I guess that's a reasonable point. But like certainly you're going to have 2 or 3 of them in your deck. And because creatures.
I don't remember where I heard this, but it's okay that it's legendary, right? Because it counts itself. So if you play it and they kill themselves, then you deal 2 damage.
Yeah,
because they both see each other at the same time.
That's a reasonable point. So probably it'll be 4. I would think it'd be 4. It seems like one of the strongest Rakdos cards. So it's one of those situations where we're saying things like, "Oh, the Simic card is bad because there's no ramp tech," or "Oh, this Rakdos card is bad because there's no Rakdos deck. There's no black-red deck right now."
There's also no breeding pool and
there's no blue-white deck. Yeah. No, there's none of these decks yet, right? So like once we see the decks, then we'll see the cards be really good. And I think that's
John. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just say, John, when I see this card, I don't see aristocrat. I just see like a really good magic card. Am I overvaluing the fact like this card? Because like to me it like makes all my dudes basically attack for 2 more. into my how can my opponent block me ever again?
Well, it depends on what the control decks look like. I mean, if the answer is Settle the Wreckage, then this card isn't very good.
Sure.
If the answer is Turbo Fog, this card doesn't do anything. I mean, in any sort of like attrition war where your creatures are attacking, blocking, and getting killed by removal spells, it's gonna be effective. Their first removal spell is probably gonna have to kill it. So, but at that point, like if they do have a removal spell that they're answering your 3 mana card and taking 1 damage, it's not it's good, but it's not like insane. I feel like if for this card to really shine, you do want some way of some sort of sacrifice outlet or creatures that want to die. I have to look through the spoiler and I also see what else comes out in the set. I feel like this is a card that probably will have support, is my opinion.
I think that if you're a Rakdos deck, you're just naturally going to have some type of card like, Fanatical Firebrand or like whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I haven't seen all of the Rakdos cards, but I'm pretty confident that they're going to have something that goes really well alongside this, and it may already be previewed.
I mean, they named it the Diva.
There's definitely going to be synergy with it to make it even better than it is on the surface, I think.
They did spoil a Grave Crawler style card. It's called Gutter Bones. It's like 1 black for a 2/1, but it returns to your hand instead of the battlefield.
Yeah, and then there's the Mythic, I think, that just like destroys a bunch of things when it enters the battlefield. That's a 6 mana card though. So
I'm talking about Thanos.
Let me.
It's Rakdos, but
Rakdos the Showstopper is the card I was referring to.
People were memeing about it because it flips coins and wipes stuff. So it's Thanos.
Yeah.
It's 50% anyway.
But a lot of the bread and butter type Rakdos cards, like the commons and uncommons, have not been spoiled yet, which is traditional with spoilers, and so those are there's going to be a good Rakdos uncommon. I feel like you're going to want to put in your graveyard somehow. That'd be my guess, best guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to Sphinx of Foresight. This card's 2 blue for a 4/4 creature Sphinx. And that's all it does. No, I'm just kidding. You may reveal this card at the beginning of from your opening hand. If you do, scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. This card has flying, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1 when it's on the battlefield. So the coolest thing that I saw about this, Seth, was comparing it to comparing the Curious Obsession deck to the Insult Artifact deck. John, I think you actually played that deck at Pro Tour Origins.
I played Insult, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Frank Karsten said that this increases the chance of having turn 1 Curious Obsession from 47 point something percent to 54 point something percent.
Yeah, that certainly could be true. I don't see it necessarily as a card. First of all, I was the first person that got to see it because I spoiled it.
Spoiled it. I know.
Yeah, that was cool. To get a chance because I think it's one of the coolest cards in the set. And it's definitely very powerful because we think of like 4 mana 4/4 flying. Like you just need a little bit more than that for it to be like good to constructed playable, and I think this has enough. It just has enough to be a strong card in standard, and we haven't seen anything like, all right, scry 3 before the game enters and I still have my card in my hand. Like that is not something we've seen. It's not something we've seen before. So like,
Sure.
It's a really interesting mechanic, and it's really hard to evaluate. I mean, the scry 3, like if you keep like a 4 or 5 land hand and you can make sure your next 2 draw steps are spells, that's great. And if you're like keeping a 1-lander and you need to draw lands, this also works.
Or vice versa. Like I'm on the draw, I'm mulligan, I have no lands in my hand, but I have the Sphinx. I'll
So
scry.
you guys kind of like this closer to like getting the pieces you need to like protect your Niv Mizzet and stuff like that, and like that style of deck.
I think that if this card was not a creature and had no card text other than the opening, it would still be an interesting card and difficult to evaluate. I want to play this card in a deck that has like a faithless looting effect, like Tormenting Voice or something, where like I don't necessarily want to play a 4/4 flyer for 4, but like I really want to find certain key cards, like whether it's an
Oh,
Arclight
that's
Phoenix.
interesting. Okay.
Like I've been playing Arclight Phoenix in Modern, and all what matters by far more than anything else is having a thing in the ice in my opening hand. I mean, if I could just see my next 3 cards, look for that thing in the ice, and then pitch this to a faithless looting at some point, or cast it, like it's castable. I mean, that's it. I don't know. This card is really interesting to me.
Yeah, like it's not bad. Like 4 mana 4/4 flying, it's not bad, you know. But like, yeah, getting to scry 3, I feel like if you have it in your opening hand, your draw is just extremely unlikely to be bad. Like you're extremely unlikely to not do anything, to not miss land drops. Like you're gonna have a good curve. You're probably gonna be casting this on turn 4 if you want to be, because like scry 3 is just a huge difference in terms of setting up your draws. So like, yes, the 4 mana 4/4 flyer isn't like, you know, blows anyone's mind based on just those stats, but you also get to scry once it's in play. Like that's just like that doesn't even need to be on the card. Like the fact that it scries each upkeep, that's like, okay, like sure, now you get to scry more. Like why is that there? Because it's already good enough, I feel like. It's just gonna be like, once again, to John's point, interesting. Another card, it's gonna be interesting where it actually goes. Like, does every blue deck just want to at least consider playing this because it's just that powerful? Like it's very possible that that's true.
I think this card could also see play in other formats. I mean, I don't play a lot of Legacy, but like you can pitch this to Force well, and I don't know, scrying 3 in Legacy seems pretty good.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I think this card is, it's going to sort of change the way we think about some things. We're going to have to sort of figure out exactly what a scry is worth in different decks, and it's not always going to be the same answer.
All right. Well, let's move on to our main topic this week. That was really fun. I'm really glad that we did that. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you think of those cards. You know, if you're in the Discord, get those discussions going about these same ones. I am surprised by the Sphinx conversation, the way that went. Not because I thought it was bad, but just because of the internet's opinions of the card. But I really kind of like the idea of like trying to fit it into a deck with, like for example, I like this better than Murmuring Mystic. Like if I can like always draw the parts of my deck that I need really on time in like a treasure map Niv deck, that actually sounds really powerful. So that's something to think about. So our main topic today is going to be setting goals in Magic. So this is our training grounds. Every week on the show, we want to talk about something that's going to help you in life or Magic, you know, to just help you. I mean, funnily enough, there's a new training grounds in this set. The training grounds is named after the card Training Grounds, which is a blue enchantment that makes activated abilities cost 2 less, and it was a card that was meant to make it so that you could level up your guys quickly in Rise of Eldrazi. And so we thought that was a good name for our level up topics, is the Training Grounds. You know, this Training Ground specifically is one that I think we've done once before, but I'm really interested to hear the perspective of John and Seth. You know, John, you're like you know, a Pro Tour mainstay, and Seth, you're a Hall of Famer, so it's gonna be interesting to hear both your perspectives of how you set your goals in Magic today, and also how you set your goals in Magic maybe coming up to where you are now. With that being said, you know, there's lots of typical Magic goals that you can have. You know, winning an FNM, cashing a GP or an SG, or qualifying for a Pro Tour. You know, with that being said, what are some of the goals that we have made in Magic? Why don't we start with you, Seth?
Well, I think for the past like 15 years or longer, like since I've been playing Magic in a competitive way, I think I would have answered before this. It's going to be to win X or to do well at X event. And that's just been like, because I want to do well and I want to win tournaments. But now the answer has kind of changed. And like, yes, we've got this Magic Pro League, which I am lucky enough to be a part of, and I clearly probably going to be me playing for the biggest stakes that I've ever played for. So that's a big thing, but and that could easily be my answer, but it's not to necessarily do well in that sense. I just want to kind of further my career as being a player, a person in the Magic community. Like the podcast is something that's new to me, right? Like I've been wanting to be a part of a podcast to talk to people about my feelings about the game, and just haven't had a platform to do that on. And now I have it thanks to you guys. So that's awesome. And then streaming is something that, like, that's kind of like, I want to be good at streaming because I feel like I want to be playing Magic as my main everyday thing for the next however many years that I'm able to do so. And streaming feels like the long-term play there in terms of, and so in terms of that, I want to just be able to make my stream great and to be able to enjoy it. Hopefully I do. I'm not going to force it. Like maybe once I start streaming for 10 hours a week or however long it ends up being, I'm like, all right, this isn't for me. But I want to find, like, I'm 28 right now. I want to find if, like, am I going to be a Magic? Is Magic what I'm going to be doing when I'm 40? Like that's what I want to figure out. I want to, like, I'm someone that wants to know things, right? And so that is kind of where I'm at. I've been very fortunate to have been winning and doing well on the micro level, and yeah, just kind of furthering myself, not thinking about, and we've talked about this before on the show, not thinking about a win or loss so much as just go, like, if I'm going to a tournament, think about the preparation, think about hanging out with your friends who you don't get to see that often, think about just being in a different place than where you're living. Like, I want to be thinking about all these other things rather than just playing my game. Like, and I don't think I would be able to say this without having, like, played so many matches of Magic, because part of going to a tournament and just sitting down and playing the games, like, I'm just so used to that at this point that it's hard for me to get, like, incredibly excited, even for something as big as a Grand Prix. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
What are you, John? What are types of goals or goals that you might have made either this year or throughout your time playing Magic?
So I guess there's some goals that I've made that were sort of natural that I didn't really think about as being goals. Like anytime I was preparing for a tournament or entering a tournament, my goal was to win the tournament or do as well as I can. I remember over the years having specific goals. One was to have, like, a high ELO rating, and that had certain benefits at the time, like qualifying off rating. I remember, like, cashing my first, like, when I first qualified for the PT, I was it was basically right when I started playing competitively, and I was kind of lost at the PT, especially for constructed. Like, I just didn't test. I didn't know about testing. I didn't know about articles. I just, I was just like, oh, I showed up. Okay, I'll build a red-green deck. So I played a bunch of PTs, constructed PTs, where, because it was then split constructed or limited, where I was just, like, really lost. And cashing my first PT was really gold, because you get a travel award, but then it was this expense to go to the tournament, get a hotel, and I didn't have high expectations. So I remember, like, really wanting to cash a PT, and I remember having a goal of, like, trying to lock a status, whether it was, like, it used to be done by levels, and then it became gold or platinum, which I haven't hit, but so trying to achieve or lock a status has been a goal. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things I remember setting. I guess my like ultimate goals in Magic of, like, top 80 PTs or winning PT or whatever, those aren't really ones I remember breaking down and thinking about in those terms. It's just something I want to do rather than, like, my specific goal for a season. So those kinds of things, though.
Yeah, I obviously, as somebody that's never reached, gold pro status, my goals have been very different in Magic. I remember I had a well, let's so there was one year where I top aided the state championship here in Utah, and my girlfriend who lived very far away was in town, and I conceded to my friend in the top four, and all my friends gave me a ton of crap for it. So the next year I was like, all right, I'm just gonna win, and so I had a goal of winning states the next year, and I think I prepared for that states tournament probably as hard as I prepared for my first pro tour, and luckily got to end up taking it down. And that's probably like one of the worst goals I've ever set for myself in Magic, because it like made this one event mean like way too much to me. Um, but after that, I kind of set kind of different types of goals. So one year, as I had not qualified for the pro tour, I decided to change my goal, and make my goal getting my first pro point rather than qualifying for my first pro tour. So whether that was through qualifying for a pro tour or getting into a Grand Prix, I didn't care. I just wanted to like prove to myself that I could do it. And I did. I ended up getting my first pro point that year, and then the next year I was like, well, I do think that the next step is like I've cashed SCG Opens, I've cashed Grand Prix. Like my next step is logically to like qualify for a pro tour, I dedicated myself to my friends, helping my friends qualify for the pro tour, and all of us qualified for the pro tour in the next year and a half or so, and that was really cool. That was a really, really cool experience. I haven't really had many Magic goals since then that I've been able to be dedicated to after having my son and having kind of a new career path. But I do think that one of my biggest learnings, from those goal settings and the type of goals that I set is how I set goals now. So with that being said, though, John, what are the type of goals, or what are the things that you try and avoid when you're setting a goal?
So I think this is, I've thought a lot about goal setting at various points in my life, not necessarily about Magic. And I think that goals encompass sort of a broad area where there's really, in my opinion, there's basically three different kinds of goals. There's like desired achievements, like, winning a PT, for example, is an achievement goal. There's goals that can be more like a plan, like my goal is to go to the gym every day for a month or something like that, or every second day. And there's goals that can be sort of like, I guess I would view them more as resolutions, which is like, avoid this negative behavior, like avoid audibling to a new deck the day before a tournament, or not getting enough sleep or something like that. So I think one of the things to avoid in goal setting is focusing too much on one of those aspects without considering the other two. So if you're like, I want to win a PT, but you have no plan or no behavior modification, you're basically just have the same chance of doing it as if you didn't have that goal. So the point to me of setting a goal is to make it easier to achieve that goal. So I like to make sure that my goal is kind of encompasses an entire, plan of action on how I'm going to get to the achievement I want and what negative behaviors I'm going to avoid. And I also think like a broad goal, a broad idea of like getting better at Magic or something like that is not going to, like, you need to have like a concrete action plan of like what it is exactly you're trying to achieve and how you're going to do it. So I guess being too vague or not really focusing on the whole picture of what you need to do to achieve a goal is a pitfall I'd like to avoid.
Seth, what about you? Are there certain things that you try and avoid when you're setting goals?
I like to, and I don't always do this, by the way, but I like to avoid setting a goal that if I don't attain the goal, like if I don't reach it, especially if it's not something that is necessarily fully in my control, that I don't just like get really discouraged because I didn't achieve the goal. Like, for instance, this year, this is outside Magic, but like I have this goal to go to the gym consistently. That's something that's fully within my control. So if I mess that up, that's completely on me, right? But like, if I have a goal to win a Mythic Championship next year, that's something that is not fully within my control. And if I feel like that's my number one goal, and if I go in with that mindset, and then I don't do it, and I get really bummed out because I don't win a Mythic event, like that's just not realistic. So I want to create goals like that I feel like I can actually achieve, and that if I do, I'm going to feel good. And if I like create a goal and then am not, like, for whatever reason don't achieve it, I don't want to just like, because sometimes you get these feelings like, oh, I did poorly at a tournament that I prepared really well for, and I like maybe in your case, Spencer, for that state championship, maybe my goal was the state championship. I prepared super hard, and then I like went 0-2 and I dropped. Like, right?
And then you just feel like crap. It's a horrible goal.
So I try to avoid that type of thing for sure.
But I do have a Plex, so whatever.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with what both of you are saying. I had Patreon testing, so we used to have a benefit of playtesting on Patreon with me, that I kind of grandfathered some people into that they're still doing it, and one of this he actually asked me this question at the end of it. How do you set goals in Magic? And I said, we're actually doing an episode on that this week. But one of the things that I said to him was explained what my goals in Magic were this week. And one of the things that I'm doing this year is I'm doing hashtag quest for 10, which is my goal in Magic this year is to get 10 match wins with every major deck. And I have a video on it. You can check it out on YouTube. But the goal, the purpose of the goal is to improve at Magic. But like John said, saying I'm going to improve at Magic and just saying that's my goal is not an action plan to do that, right? And one of the reasons that and you might say, well, 10 wins is arbitrary too in a small sample size with every deck, Spencer, but that's not the point. The point is to get myself to play more Magic, specifically to find out how each deck wins, and do it with every single deck, so that I become a better podcast host. So that when we talk about standard decks, I'm like, I actually know how this deck plays, I know about it, and I can ask the questions that need to be asked to my two amazing hosts, right? Which is like my number one goal in Magic right now. So I'm improving at Magic. I'm succeeding at my other goals that if I were to set some not random goals, but like the goals that I ultimately want, I'm setting a goal that feeds into those. And when I instead set a goal to get better at Magic the Gathering, I then instead need to come up with an action plan instead. And now I have a whole new thing that I have goals around. So it's kind of like skipping the step to the ultimate part and creating that step as your goal making. It's kind of how I see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a few some basically when I'm trying to set a goal, there are a few things I'm trying, a few check boxes I'm trying to check off to make it what I consider a good goal. I think a lot of the literature on goal setting talks about making your goal very specific and measurable, which makes sense. If you're trying to gain 200 rating points or whatever, that's something measurable. You can see how much rating you gained, or if you're trying, to top 8 a PT, that's a very specific thing. I think it's also important to try to make sure that your goal is relevant. So for example, you're trying to test more and be more prepared for tournaments, which is something I'm trying to do. And if I set my goal that I'm going to grind to Mythic on Arena, for example, that might help, but if you make that the goal, that's sort of not really what it is I'm trying to achieve in the long run. It's just it's just a side project, and it's dangerous to make my primary goal something that isn't actually getting me what I want.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Would you also say that playing a league a week does not necessarily meet that goal or even feed into it?
Yeah, I think playing a league a week is part of a plan, but I don't think that is enough to make it a goal. Why are you playing a league a week? I mean, what are you trying to achieve with that? Is it just to stay familiar with the format? Like then it might be enough. If you're like, I want to, constantly keep my eye on the modern metagame, so I'm going to play a league a week. That maybe that makes sense. But if it's just play a league a week because you want to put more time into Magic with no real purpose, then maybe it's not that it's like any goal that is motivating to you to do something can have a positive effect. But in terms of like helping you achieve something specific, maybe that's falling short. I also think it's important to set goals that don't rely too much on other people. Like it should be a personal goal, and it can involve other people. Like you were saying, your goal was to help your friends qualify for the PT, and that's a fine goal. But when it's when you're relying on someone else to do something that's not necessarily their priority in order for your goal to happen, that's something I'd like to avoid. So there's all kinds of things like that. I like it to be challenging, but still kind of achievable, or at least I don't think like someone who plays their first F&M is served well to say my goal is to win world championships this year. I mean, there are success stories at all levels, but like that's not really a practical goal that you can really work towards
Seth,
that
when
early
did you
on.
play your first F&M?
I mean, I think I was around 10.
What year did you win Worlds?
2015. So I mean, it was many years before my Worlds, but yeah,
I just thought I'd ask.
sure. I mean, I was a little kid. I won my first draft that I played at F&M. It was a Mirrodin draft, so I guess I would have to could think about whenever Mirrodin was released. That was when I played my.
I think you're right. I think you were 10.
Okay.
Anyway, John, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought
That's basically what I want to say. I mean, another thing I like to. So there's a goal setting exercise where you think about 5 years in the future or whatever, and you're like, this is what I want in 5 years, and then you say, okay, what's in 2 years? What do I want to achieve, and make sure that lines up with your 5-year plan, and you can adapt that to Magic and say, okay, like I want to be, top 32 MPL or something. Okay, it's like, well, what am I going to do in this year that's going to work towards that? And then when you break it down to like 1 month or 1 week, it's like, is what I'm doing in Magic this week tied into my long-term goal in Magic? And that's like an interesting process to go through that can help you create good goals and a good plan basically to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I think when I think about something, along the lines of things that I've done to help me achieve harder goals, I think that understanding yourself and how you operate is a really big part of being a successful person. So, if you're it was funny. One of our patrons made a comment on our Facebook today, in our Patreon group, and I recommended a book called Managing Oneself, and I actually just recommend all of our listeners read that book for what it's worth, because I think it really helps you understand who you are as a person and how you need to manage yourself to optimize you, right? Because just because something works for John or for Seth or for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and it doesn't mean that that's how you should operate. But if you understand how you do operate, then you can optimize for you and be more successful. And I think that that's something that I've gotten really good at in like the last 3 years, is understanding I'm a listener. And then when I listen, I need to stop for a second and take notes, just to commit them to memory. It doesn't matter if those notes get thrown away or whatever, but listening to something is a lot easier for me, and then writing down so that I can confirm to myself that I understand it is really important. And I think that when you think about goal setting and things like that, you need to understand how you're going to operate in order to understand if your goal is going to be successful for you. And that's kind of the biggest piece of advice that I would give there. Seth, what about you?
So for me, I feel like, yeah, I mean, in everyday life, you're going to have some goals that are just like a daily task, right? Where you're just like, all right, I have to take my daughter to school in my case, right? That's like my day to day, right? What that I'm thinking about, and I'm not like thinking about this bigger picture type of goal. That I could classify that as being a goal that's just like a day to day thing, right? But then like thinking about the more difficult goals, like going back to, I know I've talked about it already, but going back to the gym thing, that's actually like my hardest goal that I have to do this year. Like that is something that has been, has been a focal point of my goals in the past that I have not done. Like I've had it be my goal and then I've not done it. So like if you have a goal, and for Magic, that doesn't, like, that's, everyone for Magic has that, like, has the opposite of me, where they have a Magic goal and they don't meet it. That hasn't really happened for me. Like, yes, I wasn't player of the year, but like that didn't ruffle my feathers too much. I've
Not
been
until Spencer brought up on the podcast. That was out of line, but
Yeah.
Before that, it was all good.
So like for me, I'm trying to be healthy. Like I've been living a lifestyle where I've ran into mood swings, being a father, these things outside of the game, but the game, the traveling each week, and the thinking about Magic every day and kind of just being distracted from other things, including my current goal of working out, like I'm hoping that's going to change. That's been my toughest goal, So for me, it's a little bit different. Like I can't say, I can't really say anything Magic related, because so far I've been able to achieve everything that I've really like set out to do. So I'm happy with that. Yeah.
So, when you won Worlds, you cried because it meant a lot to you. It was actually like one of my favorite moments in Magic history. I might have already said this on the podcast, but it legitimately is one of my favorite Magic moments. When I qualified for my Pro Tour, I called my wife and I was crying, and she's like, "Are you crying?" And I was like, "Yeah, this means a lot to me." I assume that a lot of hard work went into that.
Yes, that was that will and always will be my crowning achievement. I don't think I can do anything in my career. Like, say I won $1 million at a tournament. Like, theoretically, there was $1 million, and I somehow won $1 million playing Magic. That would be a great feeling. Okay,
Sure.
But there's just nothing that will ever top winning that Worlds in 2015, because it was just everything. Like, then it was everything. Like, I put everything into that tournament. Like, that was my tournament. Like, it was my first Worlds I'd ever qualified for. Like, I didn't have much on my resume at the time, but it was just like, I want to play Magic. I want to do this. I can do this. Like, and it was just like, yeah.
How did you get from I've never qualified to Worlds before to I really want to win Worlds, and not that that's a goal that you set or anything, but I do think that there was goals that you set along the way, right? At some point you decided that you were going to be a professional Magic player, and you had to have stepping stones to get you to the point where you could win that World Championship. Was there something that made it easier for you than others? Was there something that you think that you did?
I mean, I didn't have any other job besides playing Magic, and eventually the writing and the content did come, but I got out of school, right? And that was in 2013 when I finished school. And I just said to myself, I'm not there yet, but I have, in order to get there, I just have to devote myself to Magic, and then hope that because I knew that I was a strong enough player, but there's obviously a lot of things that have to come together. So in 2013, I was like, I just have to commit to this, and just because if I don't commit to it, it's just going to be, halfway there. It's not like I may leave something on the table so I knew I was going to have to commit, my entire life at the time to playing basically, and so that's what I did. I was going to a lot of Grand Prix at the time, local tournaments, whatever I could, playing online, and I was able to get up to speed to where I was where I needed to be, and my goal for Worlds was to qualify. That was my goal.
Right.
I had already
I
reached my
understand.
goal.
I assumed that was your goal.
Yeah. So the fact is that, and that was like my I think I was gold the previous year, and I was like, yeah, things kind of came together, and I was. It was a moment where I didn't feel like, or at least didn't know that I was in the class of player that I was. Like, I felt like the small guy on the block. Like maybe it was a similar feeling to you, going to your first pro tour, right? Like it's like that's kind of how I felt going to my first world championships.
No, I actually felt like I was long overdue for what it's worth.
Okay, all right. But like I didn't know that I belonged in that category of player, like the elite top, very best players in the game. So I was excited to compete, and like the fact that everything happened the way it did, and it was just like this it's just this experience that
Sure.
I can't possibly relive again.
Sure.
All I can do is like think about it and just be like, yeah, that was really awesome. Like that was just like that was just like everyone dreams of that happening to them.
Sure.
Going 15-1 at Worlds against like beating at the time like or maybe still now like the best player in the world. Like come on, like that's just like a 5-game set. Like it was just everything that I had ever wanted in that one tournament. And I was lucky enough to experience it, and it was just, so.
Jon, you kind of answered this question already, on the things that you've done to make those successful, make your hard goals more successful, right? But I kind of want to pitch you the same question that I kind of pitched Seth. Not that you've won Worlds, but in a similar vein, though. I mean, you've talked about this a little bit, right? This. You want a PTQ, and then you're like, well, I just kind of want to go to every pro tour, and you've just gone to every pro tour. What were goals that you set along the way that helped you do that, and that what were things that you did to make that a part of your life?
So if you're talking about like when I started in competitive play, I mean, I just love playing tournaments, and I love trying to win invitations or qualify in various ways. So, I mean, I was just really dedicated to the PTQ circuit. I played PTQs in like anywhere I could drive. I remember playing a PTQ. I think it was in Ottawa in Canada, and then I missed top 8 just barely, and then I was talking to my friends. I'm like, well, there's one in
my
London.
gosh, I almost did this once.
There's one in London. It's like an 8-hour drive. So if we leave now, we could, stop for breakfast and then go to that one, and
Straight up, I lost a winning in a modern PTQ. I was using my wife's car. We had driven my wife's car to Idaho. And on the way back, I called my wife, and I was like, hey, there's a PTQ in Vegas tomorrow. Can we just drive to it? She's like, no, you can't take my car. I need it. So we started calling up people. And at one point, one of my friends answers the phone and goes, I'm not driving to Vegas with you. What else do you want? And I was just like, dang, my friends know me so well.
Yeah, no, I definitely did that. I enjoyed, but it was fun. Like, back then, none of us had cars. We'd rent a car. We'd rent a car, drive 6 hours, play PTQ. I mean, I had some crazy adventures. We got our car towed in New York City. Just didn't know where to get it. Spent all night at the DMV, and then basically drove in a snowstorm 6 hours to Rochester, which is 3 hours away, and won that PTQ in Rochester, and just things like that. And we had to like preserve ratings, so like I couldn't play pre-releases, or I'd have to go like 3-0 drop at various, but whatever. It was just sort of, yeah. I mean, it sort of came together. Like there were times where I was like, it looked like I wouldn't qualify, and then like the last possible chance I would win a tournament or something would happen and I'd qualify. But
so how did you I mean, you both had to manage like these Extreme Emotions. I mean, if your goal is to qualify for a pro tour, right? And you want to qualify for, you wanted to qualify for all the pro tours. How did you manage the emotions going into that tournament, where this is my last chance? Like, this is it. Like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to this pro tour.
I didn't really. I think I'm more calm in those situations than a lot of people. I don't get too excited about the moment or too upset about the moment. I also never really felt like, oh, this is my last chance. Like that's one of the reasons I really like the ELO rating system is like you have a bad tournament, you lose 100 points, but like then you're underrated. Then your next tournament, you're favored to go up. So it's just like, yeah, okay, I didn't win that PTQ, I lost top 8, but when's the next one? That was always my mentality. I don't think it was so much goal setting as just I wanted to qualify, and it wasn't about how many times I tried and failed. Also, to be fair, like I qualified at my first PTQ, so I didn't have that experience of like trying as a really good player for 3 years to qualify. The tournaments were smaller then. I got lucky in my first tournament, and that's just it was hard to get back, but like I didn't have that frustration wasn't there. It was just about like, okay, I went to this tournament, I enjoyed it, I did badly, I want to go back, like let's just try. And that was the mentality. So yeah, I didn't have to experience that frustration.
All right. So, with that being said, do you guys have goals for 2019 in Magic specifically, or outside? Let's do both. Do you have goals in 2019, Seth?
Well, I think I've already talked about my outside of goals. So, yes, I have goals. It's always important to have goals. For me, just kind of familiarizing I don't necessarily know what all of my goals are because a lot of them have to do with the Magic Pro League, and so that's kind of.
Wait, you don't know all the info?
I don't. I honestly don't.
I'm just kidding. I knew you didn't.
No. I mean,
it's coming in January, right?
Well, it's possible. It's a reasonable question because there's an implication that those in the league have more info than those not, but that isn't really the case. So yeah, I'm excited to learn more about professional Magic, where that's going, because like I think that a lot of players who want to play the game professionally are still. We're waiting to hear about it. Even though I'm in the league, I want to know, like, all right, well, what tournaments am I going to be playing in the league? Like, what does this all mean for me moving forward? And like, yeah, I would love to stay in the league. Like, the league seems insane for me. If I'm able, like, that's my goal, I guess, would be to stay in the league. Yeah.
Yeah. John, do you have goals in 2019 that you want to share?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this a lot, and I kind of have more like I do have some like things I want to achieve. I more have like a mission statement, I guess, which is that I want to be really prepared for the important tournaments that I play, especially coming off the last Pro Tour where I was very unprepared for it. There was some choice in that. Like I didn't prepare. I didn't spend the time I needed to because of other, some other things going on. But I don't want to rely on, the fact that it's a numbers game and I'll do well sometimes and badly sometimes. I want to develop a test plan that takes into account that I'm not going to be able to devote every minute of every day to Magic, but I still want to cover all the bases and, go into the Pro Tour thinking, yeah, I've done what I can and I feel good about my chances. In terms of specific achievements, well, I'm coming off we've introduced the rotating system, which they're quickly going to get rid of, or I think, and my current status is I don't really know what my status is. I missed gold at the end of Q1 by 1 point.
So you're gold.
I'm gold right now. Yeah, if I'm gold for Cleveland, I'm probably silver for London unless I spike a few tournaments. So I want to play all the paper PTs. That's one of my goals, I guess. I would like to, in terms of things that like next level goals that like, I would like to do this. Although it's not really like a be all and end all. Like I would like to top 8 a PT. I would like to get in the top 32, assuming that once they announce the rules and structure, it's something I want to do. Because right now I have mixed feelings about whether I want to even be playing Arena. So if it's all on Arena and I don't want to play in Arena, maybe that changes. But assuming it's something that I want to do, then I would like to. That's a goal of mine, to make it to the top 32. Um, and as I was saying before, like I want my like the achievements to sort of be encompassed with the plan, and I have some plans for Magic, which is I want to have more like a log of the work I'm doing, so like I can go back to it and see my progress. I want to have like every 2 weeks or so take stock of like my plans for the next 2 weeks and reevaluating some of my goals. And I want to have a more comprehensive test plan and schedule for testing for PTs and implement that, so that one of the things that if I'm really busy with non-Magic things, those are the worst PTs for me. And even if I prioritize Magic and only focus on Magic, I'm just not able to give it my full thought. So I want to like make sure those other things are taken care of before I really get into the hardcore testing. Yeah, and so basically, I also want to do all of this without like having the grinder mentality of like go to every single possible tournament, especially now that Magic Fests or Grand Prix or whatever you call them are going to be less viable of a way to maintain your pro status, or maybe not at all. So yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking. I haven't exactly fleshed out all the details, but yeah, those are my goals for 2019.
Yeah, that was awesome. I'll go next because I'm the last person. But you know, something that I've kind of half done for like the last 2 years is like given up on going to the Pro Tour. Like I'm like, yeah, I'll go to PPTQs when I want to. I'll go to, and I just happened to qualify for all the PPTQs for the RPTQs that I wanted to attend. Like it just so happened that like I never really had to grind. Um, and this year the end of this last year, taking that one season off and then being like, actually I enjoyed that. Um, I might go to a PPTQ this weekend, but my main goals now are to become a better host of this podcast, and fall in love with Magic again is like my goal of 2019, and Arena is really helping me with that, and streaming is helping me with that, and that's kind of my goal, and that's like a really bad broad goal, but I know how I'm gonna do it. The quest for 10 is some content that I'm gonna love, and it's gonna help me with this, being very dedicated to how I present these guys with show notes and how the order of the show goes, and being responsive with the patrons and stuff like that. Like Magic content is my goal in 2019, and I'm really excited about it, and I know the steps that I need to take to be better at it. So,
and going off your point about Arena, for me, yeah, I want to like I still haven't rank, like I'm not mythic on Arena yet and that sort of stuff, and I know I'll be playing a lot more Arena in 2019, and I want to just kind of wrap my head around like if I'm going to be playing for a lot of huge amounts of money on Arena for like for instance, if I'm playing best of one, or if I'm playing a crazy Arena only format, like we've seen, like we saw Kibler do a format, we saw the the Infinite Mana format, we saw a few different Arena formats. So like I don't know if like it's possible that these are going to be formats at the Mythic Championship. Like I don't know what that's going to consist of. So for me, I want to just wrap my head around thinking about Magic in a different way, and because I've felt Magic has always been in this traditional way. And a lot is changing. A lot is changing in 2019. And so it feels like I either need to, like, if I'm going to keep up, I need to be willing to change my thought process about the game. And so that's what I'm planning on doing.
Yeah, for what it's worth, it is the preseason, so you don't need to be Mythic this season or worry about it in any way, shape, or form. I was I was actually going to grind it, and then I was like, wait a second, preseason? I don't care about this. Just
Well, I think though what Seth's saying is really important because the way I've been viewing Arena is okay. Well, I want to do well in Paper Magic, and Paper Magic has certain parameters, and Arena doesn't replicate that.
That's
So
true.
why would I test on Arena when I could test on Magic Online or just in with paper?
Yeah.
And that's been frustrating to think about. But if you have the mentality that Arena is going to be a Magic like competition that is going to use a different thinking process or make you examine formats in different ways or play in a different way, like I think that's valid and interesting to think about and maybe worth doing.
I actually have thought a lot about that with Best of One, is that I'm viewing, and we should view Best of One as maybe a different format. Like, you how you build your decks, the cards you include. I mean, if you look at Hearthstone Ladder, they play a ton of techie cards in their main decks. I know people have been ranking up with like Mono Blue aggro, for example, are playing Exclusionary Mage in their main deck versus in their sideboard because they want it in specific matchups. So I think that Seth is absolutely right there.
Yeah, I mean, I've already played Best of One for Play of the Year, so I know that Wizards is not afraid to like I'm fully ready for it to be like Mythic Championship, all Best of One. Like that is something that I don't think is like it's certainly possible. And so yeah, it's just kind of processing what all of this means for the game. And like John's saying, yeah, it's different. Does that mean bad different or good different? Like I'm optimistic that it means good different.
Yeah, my opinion about whenever they talk about card bannings, for example, my opinion has always been, I don't care what you ban. I don't care what's legal. I'm going to pick up the format and figure out the best deck to play and play that. And I'm going to have fun doing it, hopefully. And, well, I mean, the game's play is not always fun, but the process is fun. And, that's the same thing with like, maybe I'd rather play sideboarded games, but, if the format is best of ones, I'm going to figure out the best meta, way to break that meta game and try to do it. So it'd be nice. Once they announce what we're going to have to play, then I'll reevaluate my position on Arena.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, that is going to do it for this week. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/ccmg. Become a patron of the show. We got a new patron on the show. He's actually a longtime listener. I just want to give a special shout out to Kenneth. He is the largest patron that we have had since new patrons since Seth and Jon joined the show. So thank you so much to Kenneth. It really does mean a lot to me every time I get those notifications. So you can find me at Spencer13H. You can find Jon at Jon Stern MTL. You can find Seth at Seth Manfield, not Mansfield. You can join the conversation on the Discord for free. The Facebook group, we had gotten some feedback that it was confusing. There was conversation was having a Facebook group for patrons and a Facebook group for non-patrons was confusing. The Facebook group had decreased in its usage since we had gotten more patrons, and so we're going to be deleting it, the free one, and moving all of those conversations to the Discord. And the Discord is doing great. People are really enjoying it, so that link will be in the show note. But if you are a patron of $12 or more, you do get access to the Constructed Critics group, and also special access to, the Pro Tour only episodes, stuff like that. So
yeah, and going off that, like, if you want to reach out to me or Jon personally, I think the best way of doing that, like, is going to be to join the Patreon at $12 more and to join the Facebook group. And so that way it's a smaller group and we can kind of, like, for me, sometimes it's hard to filter through all, a lot of there's a lot of people in the community. So for me, that's like a great way of saying, all right, you're devoting your money, you're committing, you really like are putting in that effort to want to talk to us, and I will, respond to that in turn. That's kind of my goal as well.
And the other thing to think about, we do this per month to make it really easy for the listeners. But if you look at like the other way other podcasts do it, it's like $3 per episode. So it's a pretty good deal. So check that out at patreon.com/ccmtg. Yeah, and then I think that, to wrap this up, my biggest takeaway this week, guys, is well, for one, that you two are extremely good at Magic, and qualifying for your first off your first PTQ, and I mean, whatever, Seth, you won Worlds. It's just so far outside of what I could possibly imagine. It's so cool. It's really cool to have you guys on the show and to get to pick your brains in moments like this and talk to you guys about this kind of stuff. And I hope the listeners appreciate it. So thank you everybody so much for listening. And we'll see you guys all next week.
Magic, 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 magic.